I had people point out to me on podcast episodes and stuff at the time. They're like, you are doing the work now for a relationship that doesn't even exist yet. And I said, yeah, I am. Because it's not only for the sake of like some future person, it's for my sake. I don't want to live in the headspace of distrusting people. I don't want to live in the space of my hurt and my pain and the suffering that I am choosing to sink me, when I could instead be choosing something wildly different and joyful and having compassion and living in a state of being love and being the one, being the one. And what is going to be more attractive to someone else? And again, I didn't do it for the sake of someone else. I did it for my sake, because that's how I want to live. That's how I want to wake up in the morning.
Life being perfect as it is means that my beliefs and my assumptions are going to be challenged in my greatest relationships. And those challenges create the opportunities for real growth. How was that challenged in this relationship? So, and we'll get into this a little bit more when you explain your story, but you have been married twice. And that immediately for me, I had never had the experience of being chosen, truly chosen by anyone. And I had made it very clear to the people closest to me that whatever really significant relationship I ended up in, I needed to feel fully chosen, because I needed to know what that felt like. And the fact that you had two previous marriages, you have two children, there are a lot of people who are vying for your attention at any given time. And since you have children, I expect your children to rank above me. Like that, I would not respect you as much if your children did not rank above me in terms of priority. But I'd also never been anyone's top priority. And that was part of what represented being chosen to me. In addition, you have cultivated beautiful relationships with both of your former wives, and, creating these amazing co-parenting dynamics and everything else. And again, I have a huge amount of respect for it, but I questioned initially in terms of, again, there will be moments where they may rank above me, even though you're not even with them anymore. You just completely blew me away with the way that you went about communicating with me and explaining sort of how your vision was for some of these situations to go in terms of family dynamics, which I would love you to perhaps explain more. And having the hard conversations with people who you needed to have them with to bring some clarity to some situations that were a little bit messy, to allow us to progress forward. Yeah. Yeah. Difficult conversations happens to be, I think, one of the places where I do thrive.
You are the best communicator I have ever come across.
And it doesn't make it any easier.
No.
Having those difficult conversations with where emotions are tied, and seeking to do it in a way with compassion. For all parties involved.
Absolutely.
Can be very difficult at times, but I go back to that central idea of all needs get to be met. And sometimes stepping away from someone is the best way for them to have their needs met. Sometimes maintaining friendships or close relationships with exes doesn't allow for both parties to get their needs met, provided that those entanglements aren't what I call clean. Having a clarity around that. Obviously with ex-partners whom you have children with, there's a lot of difference that's involved in maintaining the and keeping those relationships clean. But I would say, from my standpoint, that's been relatively easy. Given the circumstances. And go back into the circumstances, I was, as you mentioned, I've been married twice. My first marriage I was 30 years old. We were both in graduate school, and I do believe that marriage was very much about the child that we had. We got married, kind of literally 7 days before he was born. So I think that it really was clear that we were getting married for that child. And that teenager who now lives with me full time is one of the greatest gifts and teachers that I've ever had in my life. And I'm so deeply grateful. That was also one of clearly, I think, the most difficult. I don't like to use the word toxic, but if I could say a relationship was toxic in terms of how we related with each other, that was probably the most challenging relationship I'd ever been in. And it taught me a lot. It grew me really into the capacity to be fully available in relationship. Now, I moved from there into my second marriage, which for me, I believe was my forever relationship. And was really, I believe I had the skills for the first time to really sustain a relationship. And I was really in that for the relationship and the growth that got to happen there. And we did end up having a child as well. But then it's about 6 or 7 years into that relationship, she came to me one day and said, is there space in our marriage for me to explore my sexuality outside of our marriage? And, my immediate response was, I would like for us to shore up this relationship. And at the time she agreed, but, it ended up moving in a very different direction where she began and continued to have a relationship with someone while we were trying to work out that marriage. And that really hurt. And it was very, very difficult time that I went through, a lot of pain, but a lot of growth in the process. I think a lot of people can look at this and say, what did this person do to me? And instead, I used it as an opportunity to look and say, how did I co-create this reality? What are the ways in which I had been showing up? And, one of the things that became really clear for me was my fear of abandonment and how I had become a caretaker in life, and I distinguish between a caregiver and a caretaker, right? A caretaker is someone who gives for the express purpose of establishing a need within that relationship so that they cannot be left. Mm-hmm. You need me, so you can't leave me. And that's what a caretaker, I'm taking in that relationship. Even though I'm taking care of you, I'm actually taking from you because I've bound you to be within need of me. And I've been doing that for a very long time and not really understanding that and really getting to the heart of my fear of abandonment and my history of that in previous relationships, as well as, how I had subconsciously related that to my relationship with parents. And from that space, got to really grow into a deeper understanding of what relationship gets to be, and had a lot of healing. Unfortunately, she decided that she had clarity that, her sexual orientation had changed. And that hurt. It was a very difficult time to go through. And so moving out of those two dynamics, I really, what had been destroyed for me was one, the happily ever after myth, the idea that I was going to be with somebody for a long-term period. But slowly I began to believe again and believe that was possible. And it took me about 2 years to really start dating in earnest again. And once I did, I started thinking, I believe in it, but I think it's a bit further off than I'm actually seeing. I'm going to focus on me right now and really creating the things that have been moving beyond what I believe to be limiting beliefs around what I can do as a parent, what I can do in my career at this stage of my life, and really focus on growing myself. I don't want to be celibate during this period of time. So I'm interested in engaging and having relationships that feel good for both parties, but I'm going to explore what that means. Really the gift of that was learning to put myself first. Mm-hmm. And say, I am not going to let go of me in the process of having a relationship. And so when you came along and came from not only a space of, I want you to be who you are, but I really want to support you being the best version of who you are. And again, it was, lots of people will say that, but you continued to show up and show me that time and time again. Even to, this last week when I had to go out of town, and you're like, no problem, I'll come in town a day early and, and make sure your son can get to school. I nearly came to tears, because I really hadn't experienced that level of someone getting a little teared up, giving without me even having to ask. Outside of my mother, I don't think I've ever really experienced that from a partner before. And that was really, really meaningful and continues to drive this relationship forward with even deeper belief than that vision that I held early on about that mountaintop that we're going to. I think that mountaintop is even higher than I imagined.
Mm. If today's conversation brought up something for you, maybe you saw your own relationship and what we shared, that's not a coincidence.
The truth is, every relationship has its own map. Mm-hmm. But most of us are trying to navigate without knowing where we really are.
That's why we built the Relational Compass, to help you understand your direction in love. It reveals the patterns that cause conflict and the strengths that bring you back to connection.
It's based on years of coaching and real relationship work, including our own. And it's designed to give you insight, not judgment.
You can take it free at lipcouples.com/compass. It only takes about 5 minutes, and it might completely change how you see yourself and your partner.
Because the truth is, you don't need a new partner, you just need a new compass.
And a little practice.
Oh yeah. As always, that's what love and practice is all about.